And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, with planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another Falcon 9 launch out of Florida. As usual, today we will be launching 23 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. I see all of you guys' 5x5s in chat. Thank you very much for that. If you guys have any questions throughout the stream, make sure you tag us in chat with that at NASA Spaceflight, and we'll make sure to bring those to our co-host this evening. Joining me is Alex. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Man, it's been so long since the last Falcon 9 launch, right?
Yeah, what, like a whole 20 hours or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, sure.
Yeah. And then out in the field today, also on comms, is Max. Max, how are you doing? It looks kind of windy out there.
Can you confirm it is a little bit windy out here, but good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are watching from, and welcome to, besides the wind, it is a rather beautiful day here at Florida Space Coast.
Indeed. And then behind the scenes, we have Jay operating today's stream, and then we have D out in the field. So hopefully we'll get some of that awesome slow motion footage that they always provide us. And then also I think Kevin and Adrian are in the background helping out just a little bit. But going into today's launch, as you can see on the top left, we are about 56 minutes away from launch, and there are some perhaps interesting records today. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about this launch?
Yeah, so barring any sort of delays, this will be an interesting, not launch per se, but actually recovery side of things, which I'm mostly sure we're going to talk about later in more detail. But essentially, today we'll have, as you see on the ticker down there, that red bottom part of our screen there, you can see it says B-1076-13 will attempt landing on JRTI. JRTI is just read the instructions. That is the drone ship for today. This drone ship was used on the previous Starlink mission out here from the Cape. Not on yesterday's mission, because yesterday was a rare expendable Falcon 9 mission. But the previous one to that was a Starlink mission, also from this pad, from Slick 40, and also used just read the instructions. And in fact, it was essentially turnaround. They landed the booster from that mission, the drone ship came to the port, and it went out just 5 hours after it had arrived to Port Canaveral. We saw Gigo Donchev talking on social media, talking about that a few days ago in response to our I guess boat expert Gav Cornwell. And yeah, it was this whole thing, you know, they're trying to get down not only the turnaround times for the boosters, the turnaround times for the launch pads, but also for the recovery assets. Because, you know, if you don't need to do a lot of maintenance or a lot of stops at port and things like that, then you can just turn them around and keep launching and keep landing and all that stuff. I used to say, when, you know, I'm one of the writers for the flyovers, the Cape flyovers that we do. And sometimes the location that the helicopter goes off, that is near the port, I'm mostly sure that Max can even talk about that much better than me. But one of the things that I usually say on the script is that every single time is very rare to see the port with a lot of recovery assets from SpaceX, and there you can see that other booster that just the instructions dropped off a few days ago, I should say earlier this week. And the thing is, it's always empty. Like, it's very rare to see any drone ships or any ferry recovery vessels because they are always out. It's very rare now to see them stopping for a long time at Port Canaveral. In fact, today it's a very rare occasion where, of course, no, of course I still love you. That's on the other side of the United States. But a short flow Gravitas, it's not on the main dock, but it's still at Port Canaveral. So if today we had flown, which I think we didn't, so if we had flown, we will have seen that drone ship, but it's very rare for us to actually see that. They have this launch cadence, not just for, yeah, you can see there that the main dock, it doesn't have the drone ship, but the drone ship is like all the way to the left. You may even kind of see it. It's very small. It's way in the distance, but it's not on the main dock, and that's the whole point here. That no ferry recovery vessels either. We have today Doug participating on this mission. We had yesterday Bob for Galileo mission. It's just incredible. The cadence is just, again, not just on the launch, but also on the landing, and it's a record. Today is going to be a record for that drone ship, as long as they don't delay too much into the window. You can probably talk about that later.
Yeah, I guess this is a funny one. So it will be a record by 4 minutes. So the previous record was, of course, I Still Love You between Starlink 718 and 81 at 4 days, 23 hours, and 55 minutes. And if they go with the current T0, the turnaround of Just Read the Instructions will be 4 days, 23 hours, and 51 minutes. So a new fastest, but not by a whole bunch.
It'll definitely be, if it launches today, it'll definitely be the fastest for any East Coast recovery vessel, if I'm not mistaken. Because the West Coast kind of cheats. Their port is about 100 miles closer to the usual landing site for that side of the US. So yeah, they can do a faster turnaround just because it's closer to the landing site. But yeah, it's cheating. They do the recovery at Port of Long Beach instead of going all the way back to Vandenberg.
Yeah, so then the reason why they're able to have fairly comparable turnaround times is because SpaceX has this one tug on the East Coast, Signet Warhorse III, that is just very fast, and they run that thing as quickly as they can to get the drone ship into port as quickly as possible. Then they unload it within, I think, Just Read the Instructions was unloaded in like 5 hours or something crazy like that.
Yep.
Before heading back out.
And sorry for using miles. It's because whenever I use because I use some of these apps for estimating like what's the distance and things like that of marine vessels and whatnot. It's always in miles because, nautical miles and all that stuff. So that's why I know that number in miles. I'm not a user of imperial units.
Thank gosh. Anyway, going into some of your guys' questions, which, as always, if you have any, make sure you tag us in chat with that at NASA Spaceflight. Cooper is wondering, how does wind affect rockets that mass as much as Falcon 9 does?
Max?
It really depends on where the rocket is going and what kind of trajectory it is flying on. So Falcon 9, with it being very thin for how tall it is, and also with the booster also being able to land itself, it is one of the rockets that is more vulnerable or susceptible to wind. So with the winds that are happening today, I would just based off of what I'm feeling off of my hands and I would say my hair, but I don't have any hair. It's around between 15 to 18 knots. It's probably sustained closer to 15, which honestly still is not even a problem for Falcon 9 at all. I believe Falcon 9 can fly upwards of 29 to maybe 31 or 32 knots, depending on what they want to do with it and how big their safety margin is. But essentially, the more that a rocket has to correct for whatever forces are acting upon it, whether it be gravity, as always, or winds, they are using more propellant, and also it is altering its flight path that much more, which would affect how much fuel it uses. So there's a lot of factors that play into how much fuel a rocket can use or needs to use for where it wants to fly. And of course, you never exactly know what's going to happen in the field. And so SpaceX or ULA or whoever's flying has to account for that by adding an X amount of prop margin into it, on top of what SpaceX already does for whenever they plan on recovering a Falcon 9 booster. So it can affect it quite significantly, especially if they are not playing it safe or flying in really, really gusty conditions, which today I would just call breezy. It's not very gusty. So today I would say what are words, man? I cannot talk recently. Conditions today are still excellent to fly.
Yeah, and that aligns with the launch mission execution forecast, which was released for this mission by the 45th Space Wing, which has an 80% chance of weather being favorable for today's launch. So that's a good thing. And in the event of a scrub or a delay for any reason, they do have that backup opportunity tomorrow at roughly the same time, where it looks like weather improves a little bit to 90% go. And I guess one other thing, Alex, that we should probably talk a little bit about is just the overall cadence that April has been for SpaceX, right? This is their last launch of the month and will be their 12th launch. And they were able to reach that 12 launches despite having a fairly substantial delay out of Vandenberg. So what do you think this means for, if they don't have any substantial delays for number of missions they can have in a month?
Yeah, it's rather crazy that they are able to pull off 12 launches when, Vandenberg has only launched 3 times, right? Which means 9 launches have been or are about to be performed from the East Coast, because, this will be the 9th one. And so there you can see essentially 3 and another 3 and another 3. That's 12. So except for 8, 1. Hang on. I'm trying to see on our preview that we have here for us, and it's a little bit complicated. But yeah, essentially it starts with 718, and then you go up and you start seeing all of those 12 launches that they have. Well, 11 launches so far. This will be the 12th that we are, covering today. The interesting thing is that they did also 12 Falcon 9 launches in March, and in March they were actually very, I don't know, like they were very close to not actually achieving 12. Whereas in April this month, they were more, they had more leeway, more margin, right? You can see also they had a Starship that was the 13th flight in March for SpaceX, but that's essentially the whole deal. And so the thing is that launch that they have from Vandenberg, it has been delayed to May 1st. For that, you probably have to go to upcoming flights, by the way, Jay. And so on that one, now it's scrolling back up. There you can see it's the Worldview Legion 1 and 2. That mission is currently scheduled for May 1st. I don't remember the local time, but I know in UTC it's 18:30. It's a roughly 2-hour window. And that one is actually going to be the first launch by SpaceX in May. And the interesting thing is that mission was scheduled originally to happen around the 15th or 16th of April, which will have allowed them to launch at least another 2 times with the Starlink missions during April from the West Coast, which means 3 additional launches could have happened in April if they hadn't had that issue or whatever happened with this mission. We still don't know. SpaceX hasn't really said anything about this mission, but it has been delayed a lot of for a long time. 20 days actually is going to be the turnaround time. So instead of doing 15 launches this month, they're doing 12. Just thinking about the fact that they could have done 15, it's mind-blowing. And there'll be a month where they're not going to be that unlucky, and they're actually going to be pulling off 15 launches a month. And if they pull off 15 launches a month, it'll not only be a record, but they will have demonstrated that they can, in theory, if they were able to then sustain that 15 launches per month cadence, they could start reaching numbers that, gets them very, very close to 200 launches in a year. Like,
Yeah, so I
currently the
guess
record is 148, right?
yeah, so I guess this will be a fun thing for our viewers to plot, but I want to ask the question of how many launches do you guys think SpaceX is going to reach this year? And it would be interesting to plot like
Yeah.
our prediction as time goes on to see what it converges to. So Max, let's start with you. What is your gut feeling for number of Falcon launches in 2024?
I've already had this conversation with my colleague John Krause on it, and he and I actually placed a wager on it a few months ago. And he is of the opinion it's only $5, so it's really nothing. But he is of the opinion that they will get to at least 148 this year. He really thinks that. So more power to him. But I was thinking, my gut tells me they will get around between 120, 125. Just based solely on, sure, their cadence right now is great, and I'm sure their cadence is going to pick up as the year goes along, but there will be times, especially as we come into the summer months here in Florida, where the weather becomes an ever-increasing factor throughout the day, where the weather severely deteriorates in the afternoon. And I know Starlinks tend to fly in the late evening or at night, especially in the summertime. And also double that with hurricane season, which you never know like what is going to happen in that season. So, but long story short, I believe that their flight number this year will be around. I'll go around 125.
Okay. Alex, what are you thinking?
I think they're definitely crossing 140 launches. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems weird and probably silly that the difference between 140 and 150 is not that big, right? It's like it's 10 launches, but actually 10 launches is like a few days here and there if you pick it up, right? Like if they delay a few days here and there, they start losing some of these launches. So I think 140 definitely, 148, which is their target. I'm a little bit more skeptical, but it's very promising. I will not say that is impossible, because it's very promising. This sort of cadence that we have seen demonstrated this month kind of puts it into perspective that sure, it could be done.
Yeah, I think I'm probably on like roughly 145, and then throw in 5 Starship launches. I could see SpaceX hitting 150 launches this year if you include Starship, which is just insane. That's more than 50% increase from last year.
Yeah,
5 more Starship flights, Trevor?
Well, 5 total, 4 more. It seems like quite doable.
As long as they do, all the Starship version 1 flights this year, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And they're targeting 200 launches next year, so that's going to be even more launches.
It's a lot more launches. But to test for all of these launches, we at NSF actually have a little bit of, well, it's not our birthday, but it's McGregor Live's birthday. So 2 years ago today, we first had McGregor Live go live, and this is where you can watch SpaceX do all of the engine testing for both Starship and Falcon. It looks like they don't have any Falcons vertical. Oh yeah, they do have a Falcon vertical right now on the bottom left.
B1086.
Yep, that's B1086. Then you can see the tripod in the center, and like bottom center-ish. That's where they do a lot of Raptor firings. And then just throughout the entire site, they have a bunch of Merlin stands, second stage test stands, Raptor test stands. We think maybe even like hot gas thruster test stands, but we don't know for sure. So, always check out McGregor Live. It's definitely cool to see how many tests SpaceX conducts for them to be able to launch as much as they're launching.
And today is a rare day, because you can see there are no tests recorded today. Today is sort of like a one-off. Usually there's about a dozen tests there, or at the very least half a dozen, like maybe 6 or 7 of them there. But sometimes there's even over 10 tests there, which is bonkers. And I think the other day they were testing like an MVAC at 9 p.m. or something. and I remember one of the people that one of our colleagues that that essentially helps with the whole McGregor Live setup and everything. They were joking that they must really want that MVAC to be able to to have it being tested at 9 p.m.
Yeah, I think this is something that's somewhat common for McGregor, where they test on the later hand and eat the fine. I believe there's a noise fine or something like that from the county for SpaceX testing outside of the allowed hours. But yeah, that is actually an interesting question that it leads to of what is the current bottleneck in launch cadence. Right, it's probably launch pad and turnaround readiness and landing zone turnaround readiness, but I wonder how the second stage production side of things is going. Anyway.
Yeah, it's always complicated when you have an expendable stage. That will not be a problem with the Starship eventually, if they actually nail it. But still yet to be seen.
Yeah. Here's one for you, Alex. James is wondering which drone ship has had the most successful landings.
That'll be, of course, I Still Love You, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually pulling up my spreadsheet right now because I think off the top of my head, of course, I Still Love You had the most landing attempts at the very least, which is 95. And, well, let's say that it also had the most failed landing attempts, but it's also because it's the oldest one, especially the early landings.
Technically not the oldest.
Not the oldest, but the very early attempts. They were like SES-9, for example. That was on, of course, I Still Love You. Eutelsat in June 2016. That was also on, of course, I Still Love You. But for example, CRS-5 and CRS-6, those were on the original Just Read the Instructions, Marmac 300, which is no longer part of the fleet. And now, the drone ship for today is a whole different vessel, but it's still called Just Read the Instructions. I put it on my spreadsheets as Just Read the Instructions 2 because it's like the second one that was called like that. But yeah, so it's, of course, I Still Love You with 88 landings. Just Read the Instructions 79. Today's, hopefully, most likely, to be fair, because it's very reliable nowadays, it's going to be the 80th. And then ASOG, Shortfall of Gravitas, is at 66.
Very cool. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how many of these landings there have been. Today's mission will be SpaceX's 301st booster landing overall, and 227th consecutive. But with that, Alex, now that we are entering the propellant loading sequence on Falcon 9, assuming that they're still go for 1808 local, which they seem to be, can you go through what we're expecting to see over the next 35 minutes?
Yeah, so we are right now just 20 seconds away from the start of the launch auto sequence, but that is only if they actually go for propellant load. So essentially right now, a few minutes ago, they should have had the end of the electronic poll where they essentially, say if things are ready to go or not for the propellant load sequence to start. The thing is, we usually don't get information from SpaceX this far ahead before of that operation. So unfortunately, we don't know right now if they are if they are actually go for propellant load or not. But thankfully, we have some indicators. For example, in about 3 minutes or so, if they are actually go for propellant load, if they are actually starting to load right now that propellant onto the first stage and the RP1 on the second stage, as you can see there on that timeline, then we will start seeing frost on the booster on the liquid oxygen tank. So if we see that frost, that will be an indication, a direct indication that propellant load is obviously underway. Sometimes SpaceX, they go on social media and they say, hey, propellant load is underway. So sometimes it comes a little bit earlier than us seeing the frost. But, for whatever reason, if they are not, then we'll usually have some other indicators like, oh, the T-minus 20 minute event is not popping up or something like that. We don't see frost or whatever, right? Sometimes there's also the problem of the suit might not let us see the frost really well. And well, there you go. Just see
Yeah, there
SpaceX
we have it.
confirming propellant load has started. All systems and weather are currently go. So, well, that is confirmation that they are already into the propellant load. That propellant load sequence begins at the T-minus 35-minute mark in the countdown. That is an automated launch countdown sequence. There's the tweet or the X post from SpaceX confirming that they are indeed into that propellant load. That begins with a load of liquid oxygen and RP1 on the first stage and RP1 on the second stage. At about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds into the countdown, essentially, we're going to have the end of the RP1 load on the first stage. We're going to see the LOX chill down vent or the T-minus 20 minute vent, the best vent, whatever nicknames you have for it. And that'll be the preparation for the liquid oxygen load on the second stage. We'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, always good to get that confirmation from SpaceX. But with that, I want to go and thank some people for very generous support. Bloodhound09 with the $2 super chat saying, "Have you seen Smarter Every Day's new video on Vulcan?" I have not watched that yet, but it's definitely on my to-do for later today. Alex, have you seen it?
Yeah, I actually watched it this morning. I think it was actually released this morning. So essentially after it was released. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I wish we could also have some interviews with Tori Bruno, to be fair, and some tours and everything. We still got tours with ULA, and we're thankful for that, obviously. But sometimes with a cowboy man, is you can actually talk to the CEO, which is different. Not disrespect, to be fair. Like, there's also a lot of brilliant engineers at ULA, and it's always amazing when you get this opportunity to be with a rocket company and visit their launch pads or their factories or whatever. We've been thankful for all of those opportunities as usual.
Yeah, I always love the Dustin and Tori videos anyway. They're like such a cool team. Have fun conversations. But yeah, make sure everyone checks that out if you haven't seen it. Coco Cats gifted a Red Team membership. Thank you very much for gifting that, as did Telstar86. If anyone received either of those, make sure you thank whoever gifted it to you, and thank you for supporting the channel. Phillips Junk became a PadRad member, as did Fern Peterson. Then John with the $10 super chat saying, "Happy birthday McGregor live," and then another super chat saying, "More drone ships equals more better." What's the word on that? New drone ships in the work? Well, thank you very much for your support, John. And Alex, we have indication that SpaceX is probably planning on another drone ship at some point in the near-ish future, correct?
Yeah, we had that sort of hint, I guess, from Kiko on a reply to Gav. I think it was because Gav was sort of talking about how the McDonough company, the one that creates the barges or created the barges that SpaceX uses now, they are debuting, I think, either 2 or 3 new barges that are essentially copies of the same kind of style of drone ship. And so he was saying, hey, they're making new barges like this. If you want to see, maybe Blue Origin or maybe another drone ship from SpaceX, if they're gonna do any kind of thing with rockets, maybe you should look for these Marmac barges. And Kiko Donchev replied with the thinking emoji or something like that. And so that was sort of a hint that maybe they're looking into a 5th drone ship. We'll see.
So then I have another question here, kind of on a similar vein. Since they don't have any immediate plans for a new drone ship, at least not in the next few months, when do you expect that we'll start seeing the RTLS Starlink launches?
Given that they haven't tried it yet, and that they are actually trying, because it seems to me that the whole RTLS Starlink might have been at the beginning some sort of like adjusting case kind of situation, and instead they have just pushed to get the turnaround times for the drone ships shorter, and shorter. But obviously, especially if they're gonna have a second launch pad at the West Coast, right? You kind of need a second drone ship. It's kind of, it goes hand in hand. You have 2 drone ships and 2 launch pads on the East Coast, and in the future they're gonna have a second launch pad on the West Coast. It just makes sense to have a second drone ship as well out there, and just mixing them up and upping the cadence that way by launching more and more from the West Coast and having 2 drone ships that they can just rotate between missions. So that is what I think it's probably going to be if they are actually going for a 5th drone ship. Because right now, with the kind of cadence that they can achieve with the current operations, it's close to 200 launches, which is bonkers. Obviously, they have only demonstrated that on one single month. They haven't demonstrated for all of the months. That's going to be something that they have to obviously do in the long run. But if they were able to do that in the long run, then they could do, in theory, up to potentially 200 launches in a month. And so we'll see what they actually do. But I don't think RTLS missions are on the schedule, so to speak, in the sense that perhaps that has been shelved and actually be able to do more drone ship support instead. This kind of thing
many of us
usually
were
happens.
expecting. Yeah, I don't think many of us were expecting SpaceX to get to the 5-day turnaround mark of drone ships on the East Coast. So when we were still thinking it was more like 8 days was the quickest, the RTLS option made a lot more sense, at least to me. But yeah, it just goes to show, like Kiko and John Edwards have been saying on Twitter, like the entire SpaceX team has just been absolutely killing it, finding small optimizations here or there to shave hours off. And when you make enough of those small adjustments, really allows them to rapidly increase their launch cadence like we're seeing. David is asking, any direct-to-cell Starlinks on today's mission? No, these are all the non-direct-to-cell satellites. But that brings us into a good question, Alex. When do we expect direct-to-cell launches from the East Coast?
That is also a very good question that I have every single day because, they filed for, they have these communications permits and things like that. They filed for a lot of these Group 7 and Group 8 missions out from the East Coast, but they also had remaining Group 6 missions. And then when they went through all of the remaining Group 6 missions, they started launching missions that were not even filed for. For example, today, Group 6 54, this mission doesn't have a dedicated communications permit. What they do have, though, is they have a more general communications permit, which encompasses essentially all of the Dragon, Falcon 9 launches, the Starlink launches, essentially all of the typical launches that they do, GTO, LEO, Polar Corridor, all of those different launches, they have it covered in one single communications permit, which, to be fair, I don't know why it was not the case before. But now they have that, and even with that, they still were filing for dedicated mission communications permits, but it seems like at least this one and even the previous one, because the previous one, Starlink 653, they filed for it and then they said, hey, you can withdraw it, it's okay. But it's like, it's okay, but you're gonna launch it. What are you doing? Right? And obviously what they're doing is they're just using the more general communications permit that they can use. So yeah.
Yeah. Here's one for Max that I'm gonna actually add a bit to. Max, when did you start following rocket launches out of the Cape and going out for almost all of them?
Oh boy. I first began the rocket chasing journey back in 2020. The first ever rocket launch I was ever fortunate enough to see was CRS-20, the last ever flight of Dragon 1, on March 6th of that year. I was with the NASA social group here. That was the first launch I ever saw. And then from there, it was DM2 and then a following Starlink mission. And then I just kept coming down to Florida as much as I possibly could, including the ever so cursed NROL 44 Delta 4 Heavy mission that year,
Oh,
which didn't fly until December, even though I came down from Chicago about 4 or 5 times for that one and never saw it fly, which was painful. But I've been doing that since 2020, chased a lot in 2021, and I moved to Florida full time to do this full time in on Valentine's Day of 2022. And it's difficult to believe that 2 years has already passed. But 2 years down and hopefully a lot more to go.
yeah. So then, what that question is leading into was Gareth was wondering, when you started this, did you ever anticipate the cadence that we're seeing today? Or did you think there would be, the one launch every week, every other week or so, like it was back in 2020?
I think back then, I think it was difficult for anybody outside of SpaceX to really fathom a launch cadence above probably 40 to 50 launches a year. So simply because, one, that had never been done before here from Florida, let alone from a single company. But the fact that it only took them less than 3 years to get to almost 100 per year, it's remarkable. But no, just in short, I really never anticipated them flying more than probably 40 times a year at the most, simply because that's all that's ever been seen before at the most. So
Yeah, and now they're approaching that every quarter.
yeah, honestly, and they want even more than that next year, which is. But it's gotten to the point now where flying every 3 to 4 days it seems routine, even though really nothing in this industry is truly routine. The fact that they want to increase their launch cadence by another 40 to 60% next year it's not as unbelievable thinking that as it was thinking 3 years ago that they wanted to fly 100 times a year, which seems that's so wonky to say.
Yeah, that is very true. It also is crazy that if you look at the start of last year, we were all thinking, 100 launches a year, that seems very unlikely. I don't see them getting close to that. And then they came very close to it. And then now the 148 launch goal seems very, very achievable, assuming they get lucky with weather and everything goes to plan, as we were talking about earlier. But with that, Alex, I believe we are about 40 seconds away from the T-minus 20-minute vent. Care to fill us in of what we're expecting to see here in a few seconds and what it signifies?
Yeah, so right now there should be wrapping up the RP1 load, that kerosene load on the second stage. And once they wrap up that, what they do is they prepare the liquid oxygen load of the second stage. So before loading that liquid oxygen, which is a cryogenic temperature, is very cold, you essentially need to cool down those lines that go up to the second stage. And by doing that, what they do is they flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen through, but it's not at the full flow that they usually do when they actually load the liquid oxygen. It's just a trickle kind of thing that they flow through that line. And they obviously have this little vent on the side because that liquid oxygen that they flow, it boils off, it needs somewhere else to go, so it is just vented overboard. So that excuse me, that vent that you see there is essentially that gaseous oxygen leaving the Stromback that essentially supplies all of that fluid to the second stage. And so right now it is venting. When it stops, it means that the oxygen that is flowing through it, it's no longer escaping the line, which means it has to go somewhere. AKA, they're loading liquid oxygen onto the second stage. So when they hit that, when that vent stops, it essentially signifies that liquid oxygen load has started. We see a very similar thing at Starbase with the OLM vent, the tower vent. I usually talk about this, but it's because it's the same kind of thinking. You have a really cold liquid. You need to condition your lines to be able to prepare for that liquid oxygen load onto the second stage. In the case of a Starbase, for both booster and the second stage. I assume they probably have a similar version of the OLM vent, so to speak, for the booster load of the liquid oxygen. Well, we don't see it because it's on the base of the rocket, and well, you can see you can actually not see the base of the rocket, right? And so there's probably not a good manner to be able to see that that sort of vent that they probably have, because those lines also need to be conditioned. But yeah, that's essentially the whole story.
Very cool. Going back to a little bit more support, Jerwa, a regular here on stream, gifted 10 Red Team memberships, and then John gifted 5. So thank you everyone for gifting those, and if you got one, make sure you thank them in chat. But with that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today, spending your Sunday afternoon / evening with us. We really appreciate y'all just being here, hanging out, asking great questions, and if you can like the video, we won't complain about that either. So while we certainly highly appreciate the support, we want to emphasize this by no means an expectation. Going back to some more questions from chat, Astro Ian is wondering, how long do the satellites take to reach their designed orbits after stage separation? Or after separation from second stage? Alex?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so it usually takes somewhere between weeks and months. It's not a fixed time, especially depending on the satellite. Even on a batch, for example, today, they're launching a batch of 23 Starlink satellites, but some of them may go to a different plane than the others. And so, what they do is they raise their orbits to about 350 kilometers above the Earth. So this launch is a little bit under 300 when they are deployed, and then they use their own thrusters, the Hall effect thrusters that they have, to raise their orbit very slowly to 350. And around 350, they get checked out and things like that. But also with the whole thing of orbital mechanics, it will probably take a whole video just to explain how it all works. But essentially, they wait there even after they have already been checked out and approved for orbit racing. They still wait around sometimes to be able to be located in, essentially the way that the orbital mechanics works is that you drift your orbit, and then you get to the location that you want to be, and then you raise your orbit, and then you get to the operational altitude, which is around 520 kilometers or so. Some other shells are closer to 550 kilometers. It kind of depends. So in the same batch of satellites, for example, again, this is 23. Maybe 10 of them are going to a different plane than the other 13. So 10 of them may be racing earlier. The other 13 will be waiting in that 350 kilometer orbit. It kind of depends. So even within a same launch, different satellites will do different things and will take different times to reach that orbit. And they usually take several weeks to be able to do those checkouts and all of those orbit racing maneuvers. They have a Hall effect thruster, which is very low in power, but very efficient. So you take a lot of time to raise your orbit, but you don't take a lot of propellant, which is really interesting for a constellation that is thousands and thousands of satellites at a time. And it's also very cheap propellant. It's argon, the third most common gas in our atmosphere if you remove the water vapor. But yeah, so it's essentially very variable, again, between weeks and months.
Yeah, and with that, I guess we haven't said these stats yet. So as of right now, not including the 23 satellites that are going up today, SpaceX has launched 6281 Starlink satellites total, of which 5,800 are working and 5,214 are in their operational orbits. So we see SpaceX is getting ready to cross that 6,000 satellite number of working satellites in orbit, which is kind of insane to think about, given that before Starlink started launching regularly, I think that's roughly the same number of satellites that were ever launched. Is that right, Alex?
Can you repeat that last part? I was being distracted in the back channel. I would not say the British person that did so. But yeah.
Before Starlink started launching a bunch, there were roughly like 9,000 satellites ever launched, correct?
Yes, of which it was like 3,500 were active. And the rest were just, derelict satellites and everything. But yeah, they have essentially doubled the amount of active satellites and added like another third to the whole, of satellites in space. I was going to mention as well here that you said they are around 5,800 satellites more or less in orbit that are functional right now, but only 5,200 of them, more or less, not exact number, but rough number, 5,200 are in operational orbit. So that means there are essentially around 600 satellites still that are in orbit. They seem to be functional because they move around and everything, right? They change their orbits or they keep their orbits. But they are not in their operational orbit, or they are still moving to that operational orbit. So as you can see, 600 satellites, if you divide that, it's 22, 23 satellites. That's essentially what, 26, 20, 30 launches. So anywhere between 26 to 30 launches ago in terms of how many of these satellites are still up there, not still there on that operational orbit. So we had the question of how long these satellites take. In this case, you can have probably satellites are, I don't know, 5-6 months old, and they are still not in their operational orbit, but they're still in that sort of process to get there, to be checked out and everything. It takes a long while, essentially. Some others that may have launched a couple of months ago are probably already in operational orbit because they didn't wait around. They, whatever. It kind of is a one-to-one case here where you have to go through every single Starlink satellites to actually see that change. Obviously, well, with thousands of them, it's very complicated to actually go through the history of all of them. But we have a lot of other people like Jonathan McDowell and other sorts of crazy geeks of space stuff that do track these things. They have automated stuff that essentially tells them very quick all of these stats. I don't have that ability. I don't even know how to code.
Yeah, well, real quick, I need to shout out Bideford, a regular here on our streams, for a $50 super chat saying, "Okay, Chris, speak up. This is for you and all of the NSF crew." Well, Bideford, just thank you so much for your constant support, always being here, cheering us on. We really appreciate you. I don't know what words I can use to put that, to make it sound as sincere as we mean it, but seriously, it's support like this that really allows us to get all of the cameras in Boca, all of the cameras at the Cape, all of the ones in McGregor. So thank you so much, Bideford. And then Captain, with a $5 super chat saying, do the booster and second stage use GPS? At what height is GPS unusable? Alex, this seems like another question for you. I have no idea.
Well, we know that at least the booster does use GPS to locate the coordinates of the drone ship. I do think that also the second stage has GPS, receiver and everything. But obviously, after it goes out from GPS range, it obviously, well, you can still use GPS even if you still are near the Earth. You can still use GPS, and actually, there's programs to be able to use GPS while you are around the moon and things like that. Anyways, I'm going off the rails here. I don't fully know, but I'm mostly sure that probably the second stage does have. The first stage definitely has to have a GPS of sorts.
Yeah. So Max, now that we have less than 10 minutes to go until launch, could you walk us through some of the events that we're expecting to see as we approach that T0 mark? Is Max there?
Max?
Okay, Alex.
Oh, Oh, well. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm reading the the back channel. Poor Max. Anyways, yeah. So we're coming up here on the last few minutes of the count. We're already under 9 minutes to go. The propeller load sequence will wrap up in just a few minutes. Currently, they are wrapping up the load of RP1 onto the first stage. But even before that, they're going to be chilling down those engines. It's going to be a very similar procedure to what I explained before of the LOX chill down on that stromback. They're going to be flowing a little bit of liquid oxygen through the oxygen turbo pump to be able to cool it and condition it before the engines ignite at T-minus 3 seconds. And so after that, again, the RP1 load will be completed on the first stage. Then the stromback will retract. Two cradle arms will open on the top of the stromback, and then it'll retract about a little bit under 2 degrees, 1.8 degrees actually. And so with that, it's going to be, the last few minutes, it's just going to be readying everything for flight. The liquid oxygen will be completed, the liquid oxygen load on the first stage and the second stage. Falcon 9 will enter into startup mode at the T-minus 1 minute mark. That is when the ground computers will hand over control of the countdown to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. The tanks will pressurize for flight. LD will go for launch, and hopefully we're going to get a launch in just 7 minutes and 35 seconds from now, if all goes well. So far, seems like everything is continuing according to plan. We are seeing there a very frosty rocket already, lots of condensation. I can even see some of the condensation from that liquid oxygen on the second stage. So definitely things are progressing as they should.
Very cool. Always exciting to be this close to yet another Starlink launch. I think this is... Oh boy. Hold on, let me do a Command F in my spreadsheet for Starlink. Yeah, this is launch 158 of Starlink, if I remember correctly.
I think I have 59 on my stats. I will have to look it up. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I haven't added today's
there.
launch yet. Yeah, 159, 158 operational launch. That's crazy. That's almost half of all Falcon 9 launches ever.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And still, when you look at in a per year kind of thing, they still are launching a lot of commercial, or not commercial, but rather customer flights. You see a lot of people saying, "Oh, they're ramping up their cadence," but it's because they have a Starlink and whatnot. And it's true, obviously, because 2/3 of the launches are Starlink launches, but still 1/3 is customer launches. And when it is 1/3 when you launch 96 times, and then also 1/3 when you're launching 140 something times, it's like, well, that means that the customer launches have also grown up, right? The number of those customer launches has also increased. And this year we're expecting about 50 launches for customers. I believe they're already at 15 or so they're already in that 1/3 kind of, one third being for customers, the other 2/3 for Starlink. So they're getting there, and it's essentially something that no other company has been able to do overall. Like you look at Rocket Lab, ULA, or anything like it. Even when you look at Long March in China and everything, even when you look to those places, they don't even come close to launches this kind of at this rate. Either their internal missions or customer missions.
Right. Well, with that, I think we have to send Max off to go take some beautiful photos and get us that awesome tracking shot he always does. So Max, glad you didn't get eaten by an alligator or crocodile. Thank you for being here.
Man, if you think I look rough, you should see that alligator. But thank you very much, everybody, and I will see y'all on the other side.
Enjoy it. Cool. Let's go to a few last-minute questions as we are under 5 minutes from launch now. Jason Waters is asking, what boat is recovering the fairings on tonight's launch? It is Doug, correct?
Yep, that'll be Doug. And the thing is, they had Bob yesterday for Galileo, but they also had it for the previous Starlink launch. So that boat really did a lot of work yesterday. or essentially the whole week to be able to support these missions. But yeah, we are. I'm trying to think if we have had any sort of recent, because I have here my spreadsheet, and there was one time this year where they did not recover both fairing halves. It's going to be interesting if actually Bob got both fairing halves of both missions of Starlink 653 and Galileo.
I mean, it has the room on its deck for fairing halves.
Yep.
Yeah. And then real quick, John with yet another super chat. Thank you very much for your very generous support this stream, John. Saying, could y'all clarify why there aren't as many Starlinks on board as when they first started launching them?
Yeah, that it comes down to the size and the mass of the satellites. So the first ones that they launched were the V1.0. Well, I guess the very first ones were 0.9, the version 0.9. Then they launched the 1.0 version. Those were around 300 kilograms or so, a little bit under 300. Then they upgraded to the V1.5. And even already with the V1.5, they were not able to launch as many satellites as they were able to when they launched the V1.0 because they were already a little bit heavier. They were 310 kilograms or so. So they already were over the mass of what Falcon 9 can carry with drone ship recovery. And then these are Starlink V2 mini satellites, which, it says mini, but it is not mini. It's actually double the size of the other previous Starlink satellites. So obviously, it's even heavier and everything. They can only carry up to 23. They were able to do 24 on a mission, but other than that, they cannot really carry 60 or 50 something of these at a time. Starship, We'll see. Starship might be able to do that.
Yeah, and it is important to point out that despite there being roughly a third as many satellites, it still is more bandwidth going to orbit on each launch than those V1.0 and V1.5 launches. So they've just made tons of upgrades to the individual satellites so that even though they are way more massive, they're also substantially more powerful. And as we have seen from launches on the West Coast, some of them also have that direct-to-cell capability.
Yeah. You can see now that vent from the Strombank is coming back. That means the Stage 2 LUX load is complete. Falcon 9 is fully loaded with propellants ahead of liftoff. And we are just almost under 1 minute. It's just seconds away from that T-minus 1 minute mark. That's when the startup sequence begins. That is when the ground computers hand over control of the countdown to the onboard computers. That should have happened already. Although, the SpaceX feed obviously is a little bit more delayed, but that's essentially where should be right now, and the go for launch should be coming up in just a few seconds, and hopefully we'll get a launch. It's always exciting when we have a Falcon 9 launch.
Yeah, so we won't get to see it from this view, but we pay attention to the base of the vehicle, and we won't see the green flash, but we'll hopefully start seeing all of the steam coming out of the base of the vehicle, and then shortly followed by liftoff. Engine ignition starts at that T-minus 3 second mark. Then all engines will ramp up to full power. The vehicle will check to make sure that it's healthy before lifting off. We're at T-minus 8 seconds. T-minus 5 seconds, pay attention to the base of the vehicle. And there we have it. And liftoff of SpaceX's Starlink Group 6-54 mission, their 12th of the month and 44th launch in 2024. We'll stay quiet so y'all can enjoy the audio with us. And there we have it, a successful liftoff of Starlink Group 6-54. The vehicle has now passed through max Q, and man, I gotta say that audio never gets old. At this point, in roughly
That
a
was
minute...
crazy, as Max said.
Yeah, in roughly a minute we'll come up on the next series of events, which will be 3 rapid events in a row. Alex, what are those 3 events?
Yeah, so we'll have first main engine cut off. All 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will shut down. And, a few seconds later, the stages will separate. 4 pushers will be pushing away those 2 stages apart. And the MVAC engine, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite. It is currently in chill down mode. It is preparing for that ignition. So hopefully we'll get that in just a few seconds. So just watch and see, I guess.
Yeah, in about 5 seconds we expect the sequence to start. Those 9 Merlin engines shut down in a staggered pattern, and there you can see it in that staggered pattern. All 9 have shut down, and now the stages will be separating, and we'll hopefully see ignition of that MVAC engine. Here's SpaceX views. That's looking on the inner stage, that central pusher. As Alex said, that's the central one, and there are 3 radially. And there we have ignition of that MVAC engine. Then on the left, we see the first stage with that deploy, the rod to push the stages apart was still up. Now deploying its grid fins. Those grid fins
what will also be deployed?
The fairings.
The fairing house, exactly. Because now they are near vacuum, and so they're going to be deploying those fairings as, they
Right
are
there.
no longer needed.
Yeah, and those fairing halves,
Earth.
as we were talking about earlier, will be recovered today by Doug. Those fairing halves actually take about 40 to 45 minutes, somewhere in there, to splash down. And then at that point, Doug will go get them out of the water, which is pretty remarkable if you compare that to they're deployed not that much later than the stage separation, and yet the stage separation or first stage landing occurs at approximately 8.5 minutes after launch. So just goes to show that the surface area to mass ratio on the fairings is way higher than on the booster. And as usual on these Starlink missions, the first stage on the left will be performing 2 burns to get to just read the instructions today. The first one will be that entry burn, which is expected to last approximately 21 seconds and will start at T plus 6 minutes and 9 seconds. This one will, as usual, be a 1-3 pattern, so it'll start with that single center E9 engine before a few seconds later igniting the outer engines E1 and E5. It's pretty cool. In that time, you can generally see the exhaust pattern go from kind of circular around the vehicle to a line. And then, as always, the entry burn, or the landing burn, will be just that single center engine.
I see Max is already mind blown by today's launch.
I tell you what, guys, that had
there
to
we
have
go.
been the absolute craziest vapor cone I've ever seen in a Falcon 9 going supersonic. That was absurd.
It was
Yeah,
amazing.
That was awesome. And we'll definitely go back to that when we get to our replays after the launch, after SECO 1, I should say.
Wow. Yeah, I'm rewatching already by scrolling back. I'm sorry.
Dean are like chomping at the bit to get to our footage. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah. I cannot wait to see those replays.
There was the vapor cone, and also the sound at least hit the mic today. Just really
Did you hear the
amazingly.
VAV squeal, the screeching sounds?
No, I didn't hear it.
There was a
You
little bit
never
of
hear
VIV
them.
squeal, but the wind today was coming directly from the pad over to us, so we heard it a lot sooner than we normally do for missions from Slick 40. But also the wind blowing all that energy toward us just added that much more punch to the sound. I really hope that came through on the mic, but that was awesome.
Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
did come through, and there is the entry burn as the booster goes through the atmosphere. So now you can see on the bottom left this velocity rapidly decreasing of the booster as the altitude continues to decrease. And there we have entry
Now watch
burn
for the
has
steering.
completed. Yeah,
I
so
always love this part.
at this point is when they start to transition from RCS using controlling the vehicle, those puffs that you were just seeing, to as the atmosphere gets denser and denser, those grid fins gain more and more control. So they'll start to use those to steer the vehicle.
Look at the angle. I really wish they would turn the whole camera like 90 degrees, because then you can see the horizon in the background. It's always mind blowing how steep these boosters come in. There you can see some of the turbulence as it goes through the thickest parts of the atmosphere, and it also is slowing down. You can see there the speed is just going down. There's no engines. This is all aerodynamic. Braking, essentially just friction and everything going on here. Now subsonic.
Yeah, you can really see the angle that Alex was talking about, and the drone ship just showed up in the bottom left, I think. It's behind the booster now.
It'll be
As we
coming up on the
mentioned
landing
earlier,
burn soon.
this will be landing on Just Read the Instructions, and the landing burn is expected to last approximately 25 seconds.
Landing burn, and now you can see it. I always see it first on the telemetry. It's always first.
And there it is. Yeah, you can really see how steep it comes in, so that if those engines don't ignite, it just goes into the ocean as opposed to falling onto the ship and destroying it. And they really do make that
Wow.
look really easy.
That was a smooth.
Bullseye.
Look at that.
Holy cow.
Wow.
And that is SpaceX's 301st booster landing and 227th consecutive booster landings. And as you mentioned earlier, that is now the quickest turnaround of a landing zone to date at 4 hours, 23 days, and 51 minutes, beating out, of course, I Still Love You by an entire 4 minutes.
Wow,
So.
4 minutes. Nah, I'm just joking. But yeah, like, boy, that landing was so smooth. I don't know. It kind of seems like they're nailing them even better every single time. They're getting so much better at it. It's crazy. It's like, how can they even get better when they are over 300 successful launches already, right? No, but they go and they do it even better and, you know, smoother and everything. I don't know. I'm just losing my mind right now. So someone talk.
As Jack would say, more data, more better.
Yeah, that is true.
And here's our favorite view of an empty launch pad after successful launch. If we get lucky while we're waiting for those replays, which D and Max in the back channel are talking about how awesome they are, so make sure you stick around
Heard
for
of a
those.
slow-mo, which I think people like. I definitely like those. I hear about a slow-mo maybe, so we'll see if we can get that.
Before we go there, though, we have a few more items of support to go through. Jerwa with a $25 super chat saying that was crazy. I agree, that was crazy, and hopefully we get some really crazy slow motion footage. Flippers gifted a red team membership. Thank you, Flippers. And then Kale is asking a big question. What's the difference between Falcon 9 and Starship? Alex, do you want to give us a really quick 30-second TLDR of the major differences?
Boy, what's the difference? Well, there's everything, I guess, from the engines, the fuel that it uses, even the structures are differently made. Like, one of them is essentially Falcon 9 is aluminum lithium alloy, friction stir welding. Boy, I cannot pronounce today, or any day, to be fair. But yeah, so the other one is a stainless steel, and I think it's laser welds, I believe. So yeah, like, everything is completely different. Even the size, like, just the booster on Starship is the same height as a complete Falcon 9 rocket, which is mind blowing to think about. But yeah, it's so many different. I mean, we will probably make a whole video out of it and just feel like, I don't know, 30 minutes just talking about the, all of the differences. There are, it might actually be more interesting to make one of what things are actually very close to each other.
I was going to say, what's the same?
Exactly. There are things that are the same, and it's, something that is very interesting, where you can see certain decisions on how Starship was developed and designed, where you see some of the imprints of Falcon 9's design. You're like, oh, that's on Falcon 9. Or they started with something that was closer to what they already did with Falcon 9, and then they evolved because they have, the opportunity with the Starship to change the design and be able to evolve beyond that. And it's very beautiful, in my opinion, at least, where you see some of those things from Falcon 9 on the early Starship productions and things like that, and then whoop, it evolves into something even better. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm distracted. D in our back channel just posted the slow-mo
I didn't
footage.
see that, so yeah.
We're about to show it as soon as we get it uploaded. Holy cow.
We have to show this as soon as possible. This is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jay, get it.
Everyone,
prepared and
pressure Jay.
Yeah.
This is insane.
Jay,
Holy
Jay.
cow.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, going back to... Oh, here it is.
There we go.
And people say Starlinks aren't exciting anymore.
So yeah, this is all D's footage, so make sure you go tell them, like, holy cow, amazing work, we love this.
Look at that. And this is just the beginning. Just gonna say. Look at those flames.
I also always love...
You can even see some of the pressure from the
yeah.
exhaust.
I also love watching the gases that it going overboard just slowly fall down the entire vehicle into the exhaust.
The condensation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's even crazier in Starship because they have all of these CO2 and everything from the purges and everything. But yeah, Falcon 9 is still really cool, essentially with a suit and everything. I think we're getting close to that vapor cone. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, here it goes, starting. So there's
and
like a pretty
watch out for the
normal...
reflection.
Yeah, there's like a pretty normal vapor cone that is cool. And then here
watch
in a
how
second...
it just stretches
and
out.
It just gets even cooler. Or hotter,
now
I guess.
It kind of looks like a huge dragon on top.
That is true. Look at that.
It
Look at
follows
that.
the entire length of the whole stack for probably 2 to 3 seconds. That was remarkable.
Wow.
Look at that.
The
And I think it
atmosphere was
comes
good to
back
us
a bit.
today.
Mind blowing.
Wow. That is
And
gorgeous.
Another bit there, and it goes out.
Holy cow. And then this
the
is
people
from
in the fleet.
Cam. Let's see.
I wonder who those are.
They're famous now.
Yeah.
And there we go. I think this is Max's view.
The Stromback has already gone up.
Oh yeah. Already
It's
preparing for the
15
next
minutes
flight.
later. Ooh, audio.
Man, that is so cool.
And the vapor cone.
Yeah.
They-
But with
they-
that, oh,
These
go ahead.
launches don't get old with, the crackle and the VAV squeal and the vapor cones and everything. Because we also
Yeah.
had another cool vapor cone just a couple of missions ago. And it's just so, it's eye candy and ear candy, I guess, because also the sounds and everything. It's just everything. It's just amazing.
Yeah, speaking of amazing, our viewers, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We will be with you for all of the space events going on this week. I believe tomorrow we're expecting Ship 30 to roll out, which we'll, of course, cover, and then possibly some testing of whatever rolls out on Tuesday, which, of course, we'll also be live for. But I want to thank everyone who's been on stream with me today. Alex, starting with you, thank you for all of your expertise as always.
It's always a pleasure, and as always, we're going to be covering even more launches. This next, essentially the next launch out of from this launch pad will be next May 1st, I believe, at 9:43 p.m. currently scheduled to be. So that'll be Eastern Time, 1:43 UTC on the 2nd, on May 2nd. So that'll be already next week, but we'll be here covering it. Maybe there'll be some Starbase action as well. We'll see. There's some closures and everything. But yeah, hopefully we'll see you all next time, whenever it is.
Yeah,
Slow-mo, it's amazing. Just
it
amazing.
really is. Then I want to thank Max for being out there on the wind today, getting us just those amazing shots.
Hey everybody, it's my pleasure as always, and it's always amazing having D here as well with us. So I know some people say Starlinks aren't that exciting anymore, but it's days like today where we like to prove that point wrong. So it's always such a pleasure to, being able to come out here and do this. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and we will hopefully see you next time.
Indeed. And then, as Max was just saying, D was also out there in the field, got that awesome slow-mo. So thank you, D. And then in the background, we had Jay operating today's stream. And I've been your host, Trevor Sesnick. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. See you next time.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FTE off. Say again, FTE off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?